If you look at all the research that's happening around the space, it tells you anyone who just adopts AI for productivity purposes is failing. And 95% of Gen AI projects fail inside companies or don't return any value. It's really, you have to start thinking of AI as a personal transformation, not a productivity tool.
Leading and scaling a business isn't hard because you lack ideas. It's hard because your time, your team's time, and your focus get eaten alive by the daily grind. Too many leaders are overwhelmed, under pressure, and bogged down by low-leverage tasks. I've learned this the hard way, scaling Nobody Studios, advising fast-growing startups and Fortune 500s, all while leading multiple ventures at once. I've seen firsthand how even the best executives get buried in meetings, lose strategic visibility, and burn out just trying to keep up. That's why I built the AI Executive Coaching Program, the same frameworks and tools that I've used in my own work to make it more meaningful, better leveraged, and more impactful. We're helping leaders in global businesses get hours back every week, turning chaos into clarity and operating with more leverage than ever before. This isn't theory. This is about identifying the traits you need to unlearn, the tasks pivotal to your success, and the tools that can be built into workflows to optimize your capabilities every day. From transforming meeting scripts into transcripts, into action plans, and spotting performance patterns you can't see on your own, we're upgrading the way executives lead. If you want to scale without losing your edge, let's talk. You'd be surprised how quickly you can lead at a whole new level.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Unlearn podcast. So this week we're going to do something a little bit different and a little bit fun. I have my new book coming out, Artificial Organizations, How to Build Judgment, Speed, Results, Win the Age of Machine and Human Intelligence. So I'm excited for this show to actually be interviewed for this show. And I'm lucky to be joined by one of my great teammates, Sham. So Sham, thanks for joining.
Hi, Barry. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the show. It's great to be on the show and also interviewing you this time around, as you typically ask questions to your guests. But for this one, you'll be answering some of my questions.
That's
Um,
it. So you just have to go easy on me, Sham, so I don't, go too hard. But I'm excited to be on the other side of the microphone this time.
totally. All right. So congratulations on your new upcoming book. It's been very exciting. A lot of things happening where the team is very busy. But yeah, let's dive into the questions. So I'll go ahead and so the book is very interesting. There's a few questions that I've prepared and I'm curious. My first one would be, in your book you mentioned that executives don't want more AI tools. They want their life back. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so one of the big aha moments for me was sort of many years ago, it was probably around the time we were starting to work together. I was working, sort of day and night. I felt like I was working until midnight all the time. I had a young family, another kid on the way, the Nobody Studios was starting. There were so many great things going on. And I was struggling though. I didn't have the ability to get all the things done that I wanted to have done. I was under pressure, feeling not necessarily tired, but mentally fatigued and overwhelmed. And it was sort of then when it sort of struck me that I needed to change the way I worked. I couldn't keep doing the same things I was always doing and expecting a similar result. In essence, I had to unlearn, which was interesting considering I'd just written a book about it. But for me, it was really about this idea of thinking about working in a different way. And there were so many tools that were out there when I started to look about ways to work together. And for me, then that was sort of one of those big aha moments. Is I realized actually what I don't want is more tools to make me more efficient, to make me more fast, to make me more productive. What I actually wanted was my life back, and that really got me to reevaluate rather than just throwing all these tools. And there were some fantastic tools coming onto the market. I needed to think about how I worked differently. And whenever I share that story with other leaders, they instantly go, yeah. And if anything, it's accelerated at the moment as all these AI tools seem to be a new one released every week. And people are caught by this sort of fear of missing out or FOMO that there's new products that help them make decisions faster, that help them manage their work better, that helps them book meetings quicker. And it's all productivity based. But what people really want is productivity, but they want better performance. They want to use their time well and drive better outcomes. But they also want to be more present, both in how they show up for meetings and when they finish work and go home. And that's really the inspiration behind that sort of statement.
Cool. It's great that you mentioned presence because that sort of segues to my next question. So you argue on the book that the real promise of AI isn't productivity, it's presence. That's not how most people talk about AI these days. Could you describe why presence?
Yeah, well, I think, for most people, the conversation is still very much grounded in productivity, right? Your promise is that you'll be cheaper, you'll be faster. If you look at any research or any report about executives, we even ran one ourselves, as you know, we interviewed 5,000 sort of executives ahead of it last summer. And the number one thing they all picked about what the biggest promise for AI was productivity or cost savings more specifically. And yet, if you look at all the research that's happening around the space, it tells you anyone who just adopts AI for productivity purposes is failing. And 95% of Gen AI projects fail inside companies or don't return any value. And it's really, you have to start thinking of AI as a personal transformation, not a productivity tool. And then for me, that was the aha moment I felt, right? I was working using these tools to augment my sort of natural traits. I thought about the way that I do my best work. And for me, a lot of my best work, it ends up that I'm actually talking and not necessarily typing or writing things down. So I realized I needed these sort of tools that worked with my natural traits, or more importantly, the most important tasks I had. So I was able to start experimenting with understanding that talking was a really important trait for me, how I did my best work, I think out loud. Some of the most important tasks for me were often meetings. So then picking a tool where I would be talking a lot in meetings was pretty much obvious then. I started playing around with a meeting assistant and using that to turn every conversation I had into a data asset that I could reuse later, that I could leverage over time and capture feedback and build up this amazing data source, both when I had one-on-one meetings with people. At the end of the week, I could synthesize my entire week from everything that we had sort of captured or transcribed and synthesized so we could take great action at the end of the week. Then I suddenly realized I was showing up to meetings a lot more calmer, that I wasn't sitting there worried about, well, I have to scribble notes and capture as I'm having these sort of crucial conversations with people. And I just felt more present. And again, when I share that with people, that yes, productivity is part of what these tools give you, but performance is really what most people want. They want to be better, not just create more output, but have better outcomes. And then what I found, as I was having better outcomes and I was aligning my natural traits and the highest leverage tasks that I do, and then picking tools that sort of align to all those, I was becoming more present. I was actually building, if you will, a sort of decision-making system that would help me be prepared for meetings, to execute meetings, and then follow up really well. And that's when performance went through the roof, but also presence as well. And that's really, again, one of the core ideas that I share in the book.
Perfect. All right. So my next question then would be, in your book, there is a lot of tools that leaders can incorporate to their own working systems. But I'm curious to know, what do you think are the most common identity threats leaders experience when they start using AI?
Oh, well, this was a loud and clear signal, I think, when we did the initial survey. And it was only sort of even more underlined, I guess, when we started working with and coaching other execs how to use the tools, just like you and I have been using on a daily basis now for years. The first one was a fear, but it wasn't a fear of missing out. It was actually a fear of incompetence. Like most of these executives, when we asked 5,000 of them how did they want to learn AI, I think over 42% said they wanted to learn it one-on-one. And to me, that was kind of a shock. I was like, hang on, that one-on-one, that seems very inefficient. But when we talked to them, they were like, oh, like I don't have a place that I can sort of learn this, or a time that I can focus it, somebody to sort of bat ideas back and forth of that I'm not afraid to sort of look incompetent in front of. Because if I do this with my teams, there's almost this sort of odd expectation that I should know this stuff already, and nobody does. So that was really interesting, and then people sort of create then these sort of response mechanisms. If they feel sort of incompetent and they're not willing to recognize it in themselves, they start to create barriers, right? They say like, oh, well, these tools, they don't really work, or they're not really as developed, and, they're not as good as my natural human instincts. And again, that's a little bit of skepticism sort of masking as avoidance. And really, again, another huge core message of the book is this isn't about human-only instincts or machine intelligence. It's the best of both. It's pairing your natural human instincts with machine intelligence to drive better outcomes. And the leaders really who are using both of those to great effect are really accelerating ahead, not only in the market, but how they're identified in their companies and their value. Last year, people who are with great AI fluency, their wages were like 38% higher than average people, which is even higher than people who had just got a master's degree, who generally expect like a sort of 12% bump in their pay, or a degree with 8% bump. So this is becoming like a really important differentiator for people, not only about how they can do work and be better and happier, but also in the market. The market is looking for these people, and it's transforming radically. So you can't just sort of hide from this. You have to embrace it. And if you can, you can have some amazing results.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And this is what separates leaders who experiment with AI from those who sit back and wait. So great, that's really good. My next question would be, you've mentioned earlier about decision velocity as the new differentiation. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so when we talk about artificial organizations, there's sort of two almost like, I would call them engines. One is decision velocity, like how frequently and how often are you actually making decisions? And then the second is decision advantage, like do you have the information you need to make informed decisions with confidence? And when you have both of these things in front of you, where you're making decisions at a good frequency, with all the information that you hope to have with confidence, invariably you're going to start making progress. Most businesses struggle because they have decision latency. They go to meetings and everyone's talking about, for the first 10 minutes, what did we talk about last week? Or what's the problems? Or you're rebuilding context all the time. But really, in artificial organizations, teams show up prepared. They have all the information that they want to use to inform their decision in advance. They are aligning on it and they're making choices. So those meetings can end in 10 minutes rather than sit there for an hour and try to remember what you talked about. And that advantage compounds over time. So if your competitors are making decisions at a higher rate, more often and faster than you, with higher quality information to support them in a shorter amount of time, you're just going to fall behind. It's that simple. And it's a competition not only within companies, but actually even in the market as well. And I think that's one of the big differentiation points is there are leaders who are stuck doing the same methods they've always done, relying on their natural instincts, their tenure, their experience in the company. But then there's people who are using their instincts with machine intelligence. Like they're getting data from the company's history. They're looking back on previous decisions that were made, what worked, what didn't. So you have these people with relatively younger tenure or time in companies, and they can outperform executives who've been there for 15, 20 years because they know how to get the information faster to inform decisions they want. And that's only going to accelerate over time. So again, it's not really an option anymore. As we're constantly asking ourselves, how can we make things better? How can we make decisions better? How do we have more confidence in what we're doing? And that's all driven from the data that we gather and how we use it, leverage it to make better judgment over time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. All right, so in your book, you mentioned this flywheel called the trait task tool. Could you walk us through that flywheel and how does it work?
Yeah, but this was another insight, specifically, I think, when we were writing on Learn. I'm dyslexic. Most people don't know that. They don't believe that I'm on the verge of writing 3 books. I think if my English teacher knew I'd solid history at D minuses, so if they knew I'd written 3 books, they still wouldn't believe it. So hello, Mr. Ryan, wherever you are out there. But this notion was when I was even trying to write on Learn on my own. I would sit at the desk, I would be trying to type, and it was a struggle. Typos would put me off. I could never really get into a flow state. And I was really struggling. But then I had a great moment where, I thought writers had to write. They had to sit at their desk and write. I always had this vision of like Hemingway with a big roaring fire, wearing a purple sort of velvet jacket and a glass of wine and just turning out pages. And I tried to do that, but it didn't work, unfortunately. I drank a lot of wine, didn't work either. So I knew that I had to find a different way, and that's when I really started evaluating how do I do my best work. And that's when the aha moment struck me. It wasn't typing, it was talking. And then once I had that insight, I was like, right, that's my natural trait. Actually, talking is the way I create my best information. So I essentially hired a journalist to interview me, just like you're doing now. And we would record the calls and we would transcribe them. And he would sort of get that transcription and do a copy edit pass almost instantly because we used a very early AI transcription tool called rev.com. And then he would send the chapter, like a minimum viable chapter, back to me, literally within an hour. And then suddenly we were iterating. I had this minimum viable chapter and we were iterating and improving it. And that was one of these big unlocks for me where I started to realize that my natural trait to do my best work was talking. The task was content creation. So the tool I needed was, one, a human to interview me, two, something to transcribe, and then suddenly we had these very quick early artifacts that we could start working with. And that was really the beginning of like this T3 model that we use a lot for all leaders who are trying to figure out how do they get alignment between the way they work their best, their natural traits, the tasks that have the highest leverage for them, and then what tools, when you align your traits and tasks, the tools sort of pick themselves and they become a multiplier. The problem is most leaders start with tools first. They think and hear about a new tool. They hear ChatGPT is great, Claude is great, Claude Bot is great, and they just start using this tool. But it's not aligned necessarily to their natural strengths, to tasks that might be high leverage for them. It's just a tool. So they get stuck and frustrated, and it sort of feeds back into this notion that the tools aren't more developed yet. But your actual traits don't fit the tasks that tool are designed for. So again, that was one of the big ahas that we've seen again and again and again, and it's really helped leaders really adopt these tools and leverage them to massive effect.
Yeah, totally. Like I think at this point you've probably become the master of turning every interaction into an asset at this point. So yeah, that's really good. All right. So my next question is, you've worked with leaders at Amazon, Slack, American Airlines, Progeny. What's the pattern you see in the best adapters?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, right? And I'm keen to sort of hear your thoughts on this too as well, Sham, because you're obviously and Trisha and the rest of the team just using these tools on a daily basis. And for me, what strikes me is this curiosity to experiment. One, I think it's this understanding the framework, even of this traits, tasks, and tools, I think is massively powerful to help people realize what matters to them. Just how do they work, what tasks are important, and then play with some tools. And I think that helps people just find the right fit to their flow of work. But then you still need the person to be curious. You still need somebody who's like, you know what, I'm going to reevaluate the way I work. I'm going to challenge myself to bring better data to conversations. I'm going to look to make decisions faster and track them and see if I'm making progress. And again, one of the things we always say in our company is this comfort with being uncomfortable. And I think that's what I see, because I'd like you should share some stories yourself, like even when we're building all of our content and business operations, I'm constantly challenging you to sort of find ways to work better and use new tools. So what are some of the things you think about when you think about your own sort of adoption experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think all of us collectively in the team are very curious in nature. I think that's a common thing we have amongst ourselves, and it's really benefited us, especially when we're learning and adapting to new AI tools. But I think it's also the excitement of learning. I think that might be related to curiosity as well. But I mean, I always get excited when we have a new project and we're looking at a new tool and seeing how it works, how it'll benefit us. And even if it doesn't work out, if it turns out that, this is not the tool for us, this is not going to benefit us in any way. I mean, it's totally fine. We can still recommend that tool to someone who might make use of it. So it's really the excitement to learn for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's true, it's funny, I'm thinking about when we first started playing around with the tools and we had a Slack channel where every week we'd all try something new in our work and then we could share with one another about what worked about it or what didn't, and that built more excitement even as you're describing it. That's how I remember those moments. And again, like they're the kind of things I think in a company, if you're everyone is learning this, no one knows it all. It changes radically overnight. So all we can do is sort of share what we're learning together. And I think that is, again, it's kind of powerful in many ways. When we went on to create this community with Slack and Stephen Franchetti, their CIO, that community was just bringing executives together from all these different Fortune 500s to learn and experiment and share together. And for me, again, there's a great case study of that in the book, but it was one of the most fun things I think we did. It's like just building a community of learners and everyone being excited, humble, vulnerable, sharing what they knew and didn't know, and that helped us all learn. And I think, again, it's a great example in the book, but there's so many other, examples of that, about people just being vulnerable, open, and building and learning in the public.
Totally, totally agree. All right. So, for someone, any leader, individual, could be anyone, who might be overwhelmed and just want to start, what's the smallest first workflow they should build?
Yeah, well, you sort of joked about this. I am a creature of capture, maybe is what I need to call myself now. You're making me think. So one of the patterns I think we use a lot is this pattern that we call capture, transcribe, synthesize, and act. And for me, it was probably one of those first big breakthroughs where we really started to think about every meeting, every moment, every conversation is creating a data. And if we can capture that data, that is really powerful for us to use later. And especially as leaders, like we were in all these meetings, thinking about how we can improve the business, working with Nobody Studios founders to grow their companies, coaching executives and how to use these tools. They were all information assets if we could capture them. And then really once we captured them all, it was really just transcribing it into a database or copying it into a Word file from tools that we use like Otter. And the synthesizing would happen where we would put it into a large learning model, maybe something like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. So we could start asking questions of this data. And that could be anything from, at the end of the week, I could download all of my coaching calls, put them into a system, and then ask questions about how that coaching calls went. How could I do them better? And what were the themes that all the coachees were asking? What could we plan for next week to do something different? What are some of the challenges all the startup founders are facing over the last month at Nobody Studios? So it just gave us this great sort of information asset that we were capturing, transcribing, and synthesizing, really just to drive action. And I think for anybody out there who's looking to get started, it's such an easy way to start. It's just think about what's a critical conversation, moment, or meeting in your week. Could you capture it? And then transcribe it. Go through and see what was discussed. Synthesize it. Maybe ask an LLM to write a follow-up email from the conversation and see what it looks like. Maybe get it to ask it, can you give me feedback about how I performed in that meeting? How could I have done better? And then all of that will drive action. Maybe you prepare for the meeting differently. Maybe you send an email faster to someone for follow-up to make sure an action gets done. But this idea of this capture, transcribe, synthesize, and act loop, I think has been massively powerful for us. And I think it's one where I would encourage all leaders, a simple one to start with, but it can have massive effect both on your productivity, then your performance, and ultimately that calmness and presence for how you show up afterwards.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this workflow that we have is life changing, I would say. So yeah, I would recommend.
Look how relaxed you are, Sam. You know, you've got so much work to do this week and you're still relaxed. That's
Yeah,
what I
I
like.
can enjoy my Friday. Totally. All right. Well, I'm down to my last question. So, what do you think, Barry, 5 years from now, what will differentiate the most valuable executives?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we're going to see more and more of course, there'll be more tools, innovation, that will continue to happen at a breakneck speed. There'll be information everywhere, the ability to capture it, to source it, to synthesize it, it will be everywhere. And machines are great at that. They're amazing, the amount of information they can capture, they can process, they can synthesize. But what they can't do is decide. Judgment, or the quality of judgment, will always be a great human instinct. When you pair it with machine intelligence, it becomes a superpower. Yet for most people, they're still relying on gut instinct to make these decisions. So I think what will really start to differentiate the senior leaders, the people who really push ahead, is that they'll still hold on to that human instinct, the skills, knowledge, experience that they build over their career. But they'll be able to pair it with machine intelligence and actually get the best of both. And for me, I think that's something, certainly I feel, I know I see that you and Tricia too as well, that we now have so much more confidence in our decisions because we know it's our gut, it's paired with intuition, with instinct, it's paired with all this information and data now that we have access to, and we can challenge ourselves. We can sort of use AI like a thinking partner and say, look, this is a hunch I have. Prove me wrong. Or this is a hunch I have. What's the gaps in it? What information should I go get to make it a more resilient, robust decision? So really that's one of the core ideas of the book, is that we're not here to teach you productivity, AI tools. We're really teaching you a system of judgment to make better decisions faster with higher clarity and confidence. And that is a sort of everlasting skill for executives. So I think for anybody who's curious about what artificial organizations is about, it's about building a better judgment at speed for better results by combining human and machine intelligence. And we're excited to be sharing the book out in mid-March. It's final reviews we were doing today, which I'm super excited about. Yeah. Thank you, Sham, for turning the microphone over and getting the chance to interview me, and all the help yourself and Tricia and all the wider team have done to bring this book to life. We're looking forward to share it with the world. So by all means, everybody, make sure you go to artificialorganizations.com, subscribe so you know when the book will be launched. We'll be sharing lots more there, from workbooks and tools and tips and tricks that we're learning in our own business to help people scale. And thank you, Sham, for interviewing me today and being a big part of this team.
No, it's my pleasure. I've learned so much from this project alone of launching a book, and it's very interesting. So I'm part of like the back end tasks is to set up the pre-order page on Amazon. So you folks should look out for that, because I'll be setting that one up. So be ready to pre-order. We'll announce that soon. So make sure to also follow the LinkedIn page for Artificial Organizations. And yeah, Barry, thank you so much for having me. It's a blast. We talk every day anyway. So I'm more than happy to interview you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com and we'll see you on the next episode.